We're now going to do the material design panel. Come on. Jake should be here to introduce me, but he kind of got pulled into a HR meeting. That could either be great, or his kind of subtle hints of promo or fire may have gone sour. So if you could all cross your fingers for him. I mean, I've seen his work. I'm kind of assuming I'm never going to see him again. So, yeah, material design and the web. That's what we're going to be talking about. Now, I have a slight confession. Jake's kind of said, pools do performance. I think I landed this not for being Doug designer, but just Matt material design. They were scraping the barrel a bit because I'm essentially kind of a designer noob. That's how I kind of describe myself. But I'm obviously working with the material design team with Web Starter Kit. And I used to do a lot of native app development. And it's kind of interesting, the culture there, because you're kind of really strongly encouraged. You follow the design guidelines that these native platforms kind of define. And it makes a lot of sense. Users kind of get to this point where they know what they're doing and know what to expect. So I kind of find material design really interesting from that point of view. So on the panel, so we have Zach, who is one of our material design team. You work on Android and Polymer, I believe.
Yeah.
Both things. We have my doppelganger, Rob Dodson, US version of me, who works on Polymer as well, all the design. Then we have Josh. He's one of our staff software engineers. I'm told he fixes all the things for everyone. We have...
That's a slight exaggeration.
It's not. We have Roma Shah. Roma's the one who basically made all the awesome theme color stuff in Chrome, as well as the integration with recents. Tons of cool stuff. And then we have Paul Lewis, who's performance wonk. But he actually has an amazing flair for design and animation. You wouldn't expect it from looking at him.
No, you really wouldn't. Hidden talents.
Would you expect much from looking at him?
You may not have seen that, heard that, but Rob just actually had a really quite harsh dig. You should feel bad about
me?
that.
At me? I hope not, Rob. Or Matt, whichever one you are.
Can't even tell.
So the first thing I want to say, if you've got a question that you actually want to ask anyone on the panel, please do go to the mic. I will be looking at that mic desperately hard. And if no one's standing there, I might cry. But you can also tweet at Chromium Dev, and we will be getting all of this through, and I'll ask them as we're going along. I have to call out Rahul, who actually asked a question on the panel going, Polymer is very heavyweight, hundreds of kilobytes. If you just want to use material design, styling, and behavior, are you working on addressing this? What can we expect? And then after the Polymer panels, he very kindly went in and added a comment, never mind, I guess. So thank you very much for asking the question and then B, commenting afterwards. So, first genuine question is from Rachel Nabers, and I really like this because she describes herself as an animation wonk. I love seeing Google putting animation front and center in material design documentation. How would you suggest other UXers and designers prioritize animation at their companies, or rather, why was it a priority for Google? And I'm going to open this up to a bit of a wider question of what kind of made Google realize that it needed this strong design guideline? I'm guessing Zach?
Yeah. So a lot of the way that we've been thinking about design right now is that it's no longer important to just think screen by screen, and that we have to really consider how you get from screen to screen. So when we're doing a lot of wireframes and UX design, we're constantly trying to draw the screens in between what we normally do. And because it's the consistency in our animation that makes us feel like we're in a familiar environment, and that if we're doing motion right, we can kind of, our users and us, we can kind of predict the future of where things will go when I touch something. So it's really important that we're consistent with motion and not overdoing it, which we get a lot.
So it's funny that you mention that, because our Ashana S from Mountain View, they asked a question that essentially that was, I'm going to basically get the gist of it too. Given all the animations in material design, they look great. Like, no one argues that. And when you're first using it, it's really nice. Eventually, though, some people may find that they dislike them because it's getting in the way. So they were actually suggesting like the idea of having like a novice and advanced mode. Like you've seen it, you like it, cool, but get out of the way.
Yeah, I don't think anyone disagrees that we need to be catering to what our users want, whether it's slower animations or faster animations or no animations. I think that's valuable criticism that we're definitely taking and thinking about. And Roma?
One thing I would say in terms of do we want to have different toggles for novice users or advanced users, I think what we need to do is just evolve the spec to make animations work better for most people and have the right defaults, basically. I think one thing that we try to do is simplify things and not make it so that users are now with the burden and the onus of figuring out what works for them. Like, we want to help people out with that.
Yeah, and I mean, the spec is not a finished thing by any means. And I think we're constantly refining it and working on it and making things better and faster and more smooth as well.
And I'll just add to that one more thing, that we are continuing to work on desktop more. Zach is actually doing a lot of this work, but a lot of the things that you see in motion on phones and tablets make a lot of sense because you have smaller, real estate. Things are moving a shorter distance, and those don't necessarily translate well to bigger screens. And so we are keeping that in mind and trying to figure out what works across devices. One animation or transition doesn't necessarily work from phone to like a 30-inch monitor.
Live question, go.
Yes. So yesterday, Roma, during her presentation, spoke to the little call-out circle that you should only ever have one and sometimes none. What if I have two main things, like if I have a slideshow, I'm going back and forward. Is it ever okay to put two of them on there? And what is the reasoning behind only having one?
That's actually a really good question, because I've got... I just remember I was at an Android event. Someone had literally materialized their app, and they literally have exactly the same thing, two call-outs. And it was kind of like, well, do they live up at the top, or do I put one at the top, down the bottom? And yeah, it's a fair thing. You kind of want to tweak it a little bit, so yeah.
Yeah, I think you're talking about what we call the floating action button, and it's something that we see. The way that we describe it is that it should encapsulate the hallmark of what your application does. And maybe it's not application-based, but it's contextual to whatever screen or thing that you're doing. So we feel that having one gives our users less decisions to make and is ultimately a better thing for our users. And it also challenges us as designers and developers to make decisions about what our apps should be doing and what their purpose is, and trying to boil that down into one thing. Obviously, that doesn't always, you can't always get it down to one thing, and like Google Maps has two, so I think that what we're saying is that we're trying to boil things down to a foundation that are our recommendations, and if those aren't working, we're happy to not. I don't think anyone on our team is striking down the spec as a policing type thing. Too much. Hopefully not too much, but I think that we're just trying to make the best recommendations to build a really strong foundation for all the stuff that we're doing. Yeah.
So, got a little bit of beef.
Yeah.
So you kind of said like it's evolving, and the material design site it kind of feels like it's concrete. It's kind of like, here it is, it's done, like boom. You've said it's not, and it's kind of evolving. But how, like, if I were to implement it or I wanted to follow it, how do I stay up to date with what's changed? And also, how do I figure out what's changed? Like, even if you just tweaked it and said, actually, we've updated the spec, like, you need to know what parts have changed.
Sure.
Yeah, so the spec is definitely evolving. Right now, the couple times we've made big changes, I think we've done announcements on the Google Design Twitter and on the Google Design Plus page. One thing we're working on that's not quite where we want it to be, but is to have more of a change log, diff of like, here's what changed in the spec, to have that be really explicit and really clear. we know the spec needs an easier way to search it too, right? So there's things coming just for our own tools of how we're communicating this out that we think will get better and will help communicate some of these things.
Yeah, and just to add, I think we'd be in a worse situation if we were saying, all right, it's done, we've solved it. And because everything is constantly changing, and people are taking the foundation that we've built and doing really innovative things on top of it, and that is defining new patterns and things about how we're using our applications. And so we need to embrace that. Otherwise, it's going to be obsolete before we know it.
A lot of the changes too come in the form of additions. So there hasn't been too much in like, we thought something would be this way, but now it's this way. It's more, we thought something was this way, but then someone asks about what about this thing, and that thing that are all related, but we didn't actually cover before. So a lot of the things that we change in spec are really adding more clarification to things that weren't spec'd out as completely or fully as that we originally wanted to.
Live question.
So Polymer material design itself is very opinionated in the sense that there's specified breakpoints that have been decided on. Do these breakpoints correlate to Android as well? And what's the decisions behind them? Is it metrics based, or why, basically?
Yeah, my understanding is that the breakpoints follow what are the sort of breakpoints inside the spec. The spec has kind of a grid that tells you the spacing for everything, and we've just tried to adhere to that with our own breakpoints. Having said that, those breakpoints can be configured if it's not quite working for you. If you feel like maybe you need, for instance, for the drawer panel, you want the drawer panel to come out at a different time, perhaps. It's making your content look weird, the current breakpoint. You can always set that with responsive width or something like that. So some of these you should be able to configure yourself.
Does material spec actually define breakpoints?
I'm not 100% sure on that. I would have to ask Frankie. I don't know, Zach, do you know?
Yeah. No.
So polymer,
it's something that is like I'm like literally before I walked in, like I am working on that right now. So I think that how we handle responsive design and how our applications and websites adapt to different screens is in progress. And we're just working on a system right now that's just, we're refining it. We're trying to build responsive components and things that work better across a huge variety of screen sizes. So I don't think it's solved yet. But
yeah, I should clarify, actually, now that I think about it. The only components that I think even had breakpoints are core drawer panel and core scaffold, right? Is there another one that you were using that had it? Yeah, those are the two. And I think those breakpoints were decided on based on, as we were building some of the material samples internally, we were like, this looks like about where it needs to break, and perhaps that's where we came up with it.
And that's why we need Zach's work. So it's not just everybody thinking like, well, this is about right? Like
but that's okay, right? If somebody knows their app well enough, they can be like, this doesn't look right when it's like this. I should have the freedom as the designer developer to kind of go in. Another 100 pixels is good by me.
Right, but the point I'm making is that if you're just not sure, if you're just like, I don't know where I should put my breakpoint, then following the spec is a huge advantage to just being like, okay, someone's probably thought about this more than I want.
I guess your sensible defaults, right? And then from there you get to kind of go off-road if you think you know the way better. Nice metaphor, Paul.
And I don't want to cut this conversation off, but literally this question has come in on Twitter, though. No, Anthem Chris says, do any variations/options exist of material design, or is it a case of one-size-fits-all philosophy? And by the sounds of it, no, it's not one-size-fits-all. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, we were actually talking about this a lot yesterday at the booth, but material design is a system, right? And there are some things that if you take them outside of the system and use them one-off, like, for example, there's 3 different types of buttons. There's a button that looks like text. It has absolutely nothing around it. There's a floating button that has, it's encased in something and it's like popped off the page, and then there's the floating action button. But if you take that one button that is literally capitalized text with nothing encasing it and say, like, I'm going to go off and do my own thing with this and not follow where in the spec we say this is probably where this makes sense to go, you should probably stick to that. There are some cases where things will just break if you just kind of go and use them randomly. But there's also a lot of flexibility in the material design spec, I would say, in terms of structure and app layout and like so many different things that you could, who was asking about the floating action button? Like, that's one thing where we're probably more strongly saying you should have one thing everywhere, but obviously there's always going to be room to have flexibility based on the complexities of your app and stuff that we cannot possibly upfront consider, just sitting in our offices at Google.
Nope, that's all fair. So the next question I'm going to ask is interesting. So it's from Francis Berman. It sounds like there's an interest in material design being best practice for some UIs. How are design patterns being validated, i.e. user tested, and what are the implications of encouraging wide non-Google adoption of material? So the first part of that, I guess, is what we're doing for user testing, and then the second part is kind of what is, if, like, let's say everyone's using material, what is the result of that? Who wants to go?
I'll talk about user testing a little bit first. So we have a user experience research team that's worked on material design from the beginning, and they've user tested all sorts of pieces sort of early in the design process and later in the design process, and that's definitely influenced some of the decisions. There are probably things that we still need to do more testing on, so I won't say that everything has been perfectly tested and it's perfect, because it's probably not, right? That's to the point of how a lot of this stuff is still going to be changing and iterating. We also have been working with all of the Google products that are implementing material design, and they have their own UX testing and their own metrics. So maybe they, in their first version where they launch something using some material design concept, they might collect a bunch of data for us, collect a bunch of metrics, and tell us that, like, we tried this thing you had in spec, but our click-through rate on this thing dropped a lot, right? And that'll give us something to take back to our design team and recheck over those things. So we're both doing it on those kind of smaller scale UX studies and on the larger scale metrics collected at the product level.
Yeah, to the second part, I think there is definitely we get the question a lot of, like, where is my brand if I follow the spec, and we've been reviewing a ton of third-party Android apps right now, and it's actually like so much more exciting to see how people are injecting their brand into their apps right now, because we're no longer saying, at least on Android, like, your logo is this big and it's on the top left corner in the toolbar. We're saying, like, we're leaving it a little more open. It's flexible. You can express your brand through color, through content, through the way that you talk about things in your app. And there are other opportunities for just like big, bold brand decisions that are not just like a 56 dip thing in the corner. And so I think there are definitely aspects of it that, like, there are similarities, and in those similarities, like I said in the beginning, like, our users know where things are, and they know how things will react when they touch them, and they know where certain things will bring them after they interact with them. And it's through those patterns that people are just learning about, like, how to just whip through the internet quicker,
And it's kind of, I guess there's a little bit of a dark art to it, right? Like, because if you've got your brand, you're going to have a design team. They almost want to get certain things across to their user, but if you to then apply that to something else, it is kind of a fine art. Like, that's always the impression I've got from any of the designers I've worked with. So Francis Berman has also asked the next question, and this is right about when it went a little bit Jerry Springer during the Polymer talk, when Alice was just like, accessibility, what? What's going on with focus states and stuff like that in material? So yeah, Francis Berman asked, what's Material's approach for accessibility support? Silence.
We should have accessibility support.
Yeah, and yeah, totally. Yeah.
Oh, that was easy.
I mean, I don't think anybody is saying that we don't want accessibility standards. Obviously, like, when our goal is to organize the world's information for everyone, like, everyone is included in that, and I think that we are doing our best to, and maybe it's not totally apparent yet, but, like, we're doing our best to make everything that we're doing accessible and work for everyone.
It's worth noting, like, some things have already been worked on a lot, like part of the stuff behind the color palette and some of the suggested colors for typography. are directly aligned to accessibility contrast ratios, and we've thought about those a lot. So a lot of that's gone into there. Some of the things like focus states are things that we need to spend a little more time on. We haven't completely figured out how that should work to hit all the accessibility angles we want to hit, and also fit within the design.
So one of the things I was going to add to that, I'm moderator, I can say whatever I want. So in the web starter kit project, we've already, like I said in the talk yesterday, like we've been working with the material design team to like bring in stuff that's just not there. We're pretty much already hitting the accessibility stuff because obviously, like Adio's money, he's working on the project. He knows what the Polymer team are going through with all of this, and we're going to get to that point as well where we're going to go, hey, we've done this kind of like material design style guide, and we've also got keyboard support, but what do we do with that now? Because we're ready to go and style that stuff, but what do we do? So I think it's going to be a point where if it's not clearly defined, like it's going to be one of those things where each project's going to start kicking people. Until then, people are probably already building it in, but they're doing their own thing, and it's just not standardized.
Yeah, I definitely agree that standardizing it is beneficial in progress.
I've got so many questions here. Oh, no one live. Damn it. So the next question I'm going to ask, and this is it's from Sil, but I'm assuming that's Stuart language because I follow him on Twitter. But basically, his question is saying, if you work on a native platform, you're kind of encouraged to follow certain design guidelines. And one of the really big anti-patterns you can just never follow is like, don't take an iOS app and then just move it onto Android. Like that seemed as a massive anti-pattern. So why is it that material design can kind of be pitched as this kind of one-size-fits-all in terms of just design language across different platforms? And is that something that we should encourage or not? And then is there any problem of doing the reverse, of taking something like Metro and moving that onto Android and the web? So it's kind of, yeah, it's an interesting question because it is a massive anti-pattern within some communities, and yet material design is kind of like the opposite.
I would say some of those are anti-patterns because those design guidelines were baked in an environment for a specific thing, right? Like the iOS design guidelines are kind of specific to a mobile platform, where a lot of the things we've tried to do for material design is really taking a broader approach to trying to design across mobile and desktop all at the same time. We haven't hit all those things we need to hit, but it's coming at that from a broad angle. So I think that helps make it apply more across the board than just taking something that was designed for one thing and putting it somewhere else, right? We're trying to design something that's really designed for all things and help give people guidelines to design your own apps with that perspective, right? So when you're designing an app, you're not designing your mobile app and then thinking like, oh, how do I make a website out of this? You're designing one app that works well on a phone and works well on a big monitor and across everywhere in between.
So Francis Berman has come back with another question. You cheeky little devil. So why wasn't accessibility a priority at the start? Now, I think it's already unfair because we heard from the Polymer team that there was like a blinking thing involved or pulsating. So it sounded like it was thought from the start. At least I hope it was.
Yeah, it definitely was. I mean, and we sometimes when doing things in design first, like we push things a little too far sometimes, which is like healthy,
you have too much coffee.
Yeah, we have too much coffee, you know, whatever it is. Like, I think that is how people should be designing, is to say like, let's keep pushing this further and further and further. And sometimes you make decisions that are in that process not accessible, and so then it's like, okay, where do we start to step back? How do we rein this in a little bit to make sure that everyone can use it?
And I would say accessibility was a priority at the start and has been an important priority through. I think focus states are an example of something that weren't prioritized as much early on because we were focusing more towards mobile and to touch interfaces where focus states are just less important. Moving towards the web and keyboards, then focus states are much more important. And that's why they've probably come a little bit later.
No, that's fair enough, I think. So we have a question from someone called Pete. What lessons have you learned from apps that you've currently switched to Material? I'm going to start with Mr. Lewis because you're being awfully quiet, sir.
That is because I am feeling rather unwell. Do forgive me, folks. It's remarkable
If
sitting
you've
on a
gotta
panel.
run-
If I've got to run, don't judge me. It's just remarkable. I think jet lag. So I had
hear
the kind of the challenge, I suppose, of taking the Chrome Dev Summit site that I did last year and materializing it. And it's really hard because it's a content site, and the spec doesn't say much about content sites. And so you look at it and it kind of goes, I'm material, but at the same time, I probably got loads of things wrong. And so the challenge is, I don't know, is to put it in front of people who do know material better than you and ask them. And I'm in a fortunate position that I can ask people who worked on material and say, is this wrong? And they go, yes, it is. And then you try and fix it as best you can. You try and make it make sense. And I hope I struck that balance. You know, I did follow the key lines. And you try and, in my case, I think, it's like there are some immutables of material, like the key lines, the contrast ratios, the things that should make it feel material even if you go and make other mistakes or changes. And there are other things that I think you have the flexibility and you should take advantage of that flexibility and try and just make it work for the thing that you're building. So that's probably the thing I learned, that it's not immutable, it's flexible, you just have to be the right kind of flexible with it.
Yeah, I'll sort of second that. In particular, there's some immutable parts, as Paul was saying, that are really nice. I actually really, when I did the first pass of the contacts app, I sent it to Zach, and then Zach was like, "There's a lot of things in here that we have in the don't column," and I was like, "Okay." And he was like, "Follow the key lines." And the key lines, for those of you who don't know, they're just the guidelines that basically say, you know, we have these things that are like 8 dip apart or whatever, or 16 dip or whatever, and it's really, really, really nice because you start to, they start answering questions for you. Like you're looking at your thing and you're like, how far is this thing supposed to be apart? And then you're just like, okay, 8 dip, 16 dip, whatever. And it's really nice because then just rationalizing how you should structure your page and everything becomes very simple and becomes very clean, and your design kind of just starts to unify itself. So I actually really like the guidance that's there in the materials.
When you look at the don'ts, right? I mean, I look at the don'ts and I'm like, oh, that's ugly. It's like, it's trying to do the material thing, but it looks so wrong. And the don'ts are just as helpful as the do's for me, because they, like, you often, when you look at something, you're like, okay, I get what you mean in this context, but the don'ts kind of give you the anti-patterns. They give you the context of the things you definitely should not do. And when you look at them, you go, yeah, I see why I shouldn't do that visually. At least I hope. I mean, that's helpful for me anyway.
Zach is actually working on more grids and layouts for content-oriented sites versus like very appy sites.
I think it's too late.
It's coming.
Yeah. Next year, I get it.
Yeah.
Woo!
No, I mean, when you work on mobile first,
right,
something has to come second. So everything has been in flight, you know, and we've been thinking about things all along and how it scales, but. Especially when we're focusing on so much focus on apps, content sites like have come second, and we're working on that stuff constantly. And getting back to just the responsive grid solutions, like it's included in that content sites. And
I mean, the material spec site is a site, and it looks materially. There are clues there.
Definitely,
and you know, it does take it may be more work than perhaps I would have liked, but that's not to say you can't do it, right? I don't believe it's impossible. And like you say, you're working at some. I'm high-fiving from over here.
I think what we're doing right now is that the grid that's on the spec site is quite a very simple grid, and there's a very simple logic to it. And what we're trying to do is run a lot of different types of content through it to see how it holds up and see where we need to revise it and turn it into something that we can use like systematically.
And it should be quite fun because then I can steal all of his hard work, stick it in Web Starter Kit, and steal all the glory. No.
I mean, what we're trying to do is just build a really strong foundation for all this stuff. I keep saying it, but if we have that really strong foundation and tools to help us get to this strong foundation, then we don't have to think about things like, how big should I make this type? How far should I put this thing from the edge of the screen? What should happen when I touch this thing? And we can think about other bigger things, like why are people using our apps? Like what should they be using them for? And what's next, you know?
So Roma, I was kind of hoping you'd jump into some of the stuff that you've been doing with Chrome, because in my head, the whole change of Chrome around when Material Design came out, and Chrome now compared to what it used to be is actually pretty different. And in my head, I was like, how do you approach materializing Chrome? Because ultimately, Material can be in the web, and Chrome for Android is on a thing that is Material, and you're trying to materialize the thing that's sat right in the middle.
Yeah.
So do you any input on what the hell happened there, in the process?
Yeah, so I touched on this a little bit yesterday, but we don't think of Chrome as an individual app, like a single app, right? It's a platform, it's a meta platform within other platforms, and we are there for other people's content. So the idea that we would have a very material toolbar and then right below it would be a material toolbar was a little too meta for us. So I think that we have taken a lot of the material principles and applied it to things like pre-L for Chrome for Android that still has its own tab switcher and stuff like that. We have taken a spin on material in the sense of trying to give developers the ability to, give theme color to their toolbar and materialize the Chrome parts of things for themselves. It's kind of bizarre, but
you actually went a level more meta than I actually had considered.
Yeah.
Well done.
Yeah. One of the things that we're thinking about is what we do on desktop. So the easiest thing for us to think about is how to materialize the content UI that we have, like bookmarks and settings and history and all those things. But we still actually haven't quite figured out what to do for things like desktop or things where we have this very, very old school metaphor of tabs, which basically the material design spec doesn't cover a lot of the things that we do because we're so weird and different. So we have to kind of figure out where we do fit in there. The other thing that we have...
I just want to say, I bet that applies to a lot of the ideas that are floating around, that maybe we can't find the specific thing in spec that relates exactly to what we're trying to redo.
Yeah.
But I think what's most exciting about all of this stuff is that everyone is rethinking what exists, right? And saying how do we do this better? And even if it's not even if the icon is 25 dip instead of 24 dip, it's still challenging what exists and trying to make things better. And I think that's the really exciting part about all of this. Yeah.
One of the things that's come up that's resonated with me, because we've thought a lot about this on the Chrome team, is we are on a bunch of different platforms, right? We're on OS X, Windows, Linux, iOS, Android, and so because we're the container for other apps, we have to figure out what the right balance is between being consistent across all our platforms and also fitting into the platforms in a way that doesn't make us stand out more than we want to.
That all sounds fair. So meta. Live question. Yes, sir.
Sure. So first of all, I don't think this happens enough in the industry, but I just want to say props to the material team. I think it looks phenomenal. And for, I think Google has gotten a lot of flack in the past for not having enough design. So just, I think, really great job. So thanks for all the work that you guys have done. Seriously, it is beautiful. So my question is more around how do you see the process for these kind of, Paul, you did a lot of work for some custom elements. How do you see that kind of evolving to getting to a point where maybe they become paper elements and then maybe they somehow, get into the spec somewhere? What is that process? Is it do you see a pull request happening in GitHub on Polymer? Or I'm just kind of curious how you see new elements and new things kind of coming in from the community.
Yeah, right now there are still actually parts of the spec that we haven't implemented. There's certain kinds of containers. One thing that people bring up a lot is they're where's the card? How come you don't just have a card? It's all over the spec. And I'm and I ask the team all the time, can we have a card? And they're like,
I can give you a card now.
Yeah?
You want to polymerize my stuff?
Well, we have a card, actually, but it's hidden. It's in
What?
Polymer Labs. Yeah, swipeable card. It's in Polymer Labs or something like that, but it's hidden. But I want that to get promoted. I want that to be an official paper element. So yeah, there's some stuff that actually is still in the spec that we have not pulled in yet. as far as like an external pull request for that, I don't know. Like that's not something that I guess we haven't. I don't know if you've even seen any yet. Someone being like, "Here is a paper element. I made it for you." I guess we'd be open to it. I mean, we do everything out in the open, and if it follows the spec and it's something that's missing, that would be pretty cool. But yeah, I guess we haven't even seen that yet. But if there's something that the team is working on that they want us to build, I mean, we sit like next to each other, so they just can tell us, and we add it that way.
We've interestingly seen this even just within Google, right? So, Polymer guys are building their stuff, but there's other teams building on other frameworks within Google, and they've built different variants, and some people come along and they're like, oh, nobody built this thing. And so even just within the company, we're working a lot with these different teams to do things such that they're following spec if it is outlined in spec, and if it's not outlined in spec, we're trying to get them in touch with designers. Now that doesn't scale to the whole world, to all the third-party stuff. But we've seen that happen a little bit externally with our icons. So we released the set of all the material icons, and like I feel like the day after we released it, someone popped up like a totally third-party unrelated site, but it had all of our icons, and then they were already making like community contributions to that of icons done in our style. And that's something that's really interesting and exciting to me, to see how we can leverage the whole community to contribute to these things.
Totally, yeah.
I do think it's a challenging organizational problem to keep the quality and the to-spec-ness of things where we want it to be.
Sure.
But I think it's something interesting for us to look at.
Cool. Thanks,
So
guys. Thanks.
one thing that was in your question that I don't think was answered, like, so what happens if someone wanted to add something, like say they felt that something was missing in the spec and they wanted to actually add it in? How does that work internally, and could it be made to work externally as well? Like, yeah.
I don't know.
I'll take that as a
I think,
no.
yeah, I mean, we do a lot of like we're currently doing a lot of app reviews, and those are both third-party app reviews and internal app reviews. And there are a lot of stuff that comes from those app reviews, like, oh, we do need to think about pagination or something. Maybe we need to get that in. Mm-hmm. And I don't know. There's a lot of communities that we all follow, like the Google Design Twitter and G+ and all the dev relations like stuff that's happening. like we're watching, you know, and not in a non-creepy way.
and with a lot of it, just do it, right? Like if you think there's an article missing from the spec, like write the article and put it on your blog or put it somewhere, and get the attention around it. And if people latch onto it, like we'll see it. And I think that's a lot. And same thing with like, say you build some new component, right? Like just build it, create it, put it out there, let people use it. And I think that contributes back to the whole community for sure, doing this stuff.
And there was actually this is something that happened in the Android community, because you had the nav drawer coming in from the side, and basically there was a ton of third-party libraries, and Google didn't actually have a voice of whether to do it or not. And it was kind of frustrating to watch this, like the community basically try and do different things. And it got even worse because each Google product had a slightly different version of the drawer, and everyone was like, "Oh, I've done a library for this one. I've done a library for that one," and it was kind of frustrating. But eventually, the fact the community latched on to these libraries and were literally like, "Look, this is actually a navigation pattern that works for us, and users seem to like it." We listened, and then we just went and did it. I don't like how long it took us to do it, I'd say that, but it happened. So it could easily be like that. I also really like the analogy that someone I think some of our products, and they literally took a nav drawer and went, here's the different ways that they do it in different products. And this is great, because if you have to sell something to a client, you pick one and then use this as an actual guide for it and validate it that way. That's bad. So we should fix that. But yeah, thank you for your question. So this is from Roman Nurek, who is also he's on the DevRel design team. Since material design is focused on touch, should anything change when designing primarily for keyboard and mice? And I'm going to open that up to TVs as well, because why not? D-pad.
Yes, I mean our stuff should adapt to the way that our users are using them. We do try and keep a lot of stuff similar though. The Chromebook Pixel is a touchscreen, so it should have minimum touch targets that are the same as any other touchscreen. And I think with those things in mind, we have taken into careful consideration how stuff looks and feels on different screens and devices. And so yes and no.
Because this is it. I remember an article from Luke W. and he actually made the point that if you tried to change what kind of UI you do based on whether it was on a touchscreen or a mouse and keyboard, it actually became really hard to do that on the web. Like that's, I want to say borderline impossible to do perfectly.
Yeah.
Like, Polymer, do you touch anything like this, or is it just kind of like you're still in the realm of web and this is just the state of the nation?
No, that's all right. I don't know if we're like significantly changing anything when you're like our UI isn't changing or anything like that for elements that are on like a mobile screen or a desktop. In practice, I mean, when I was building the contacts app, for instance, like there wasn't this thing where I was like, oh, there's this missing piece. Like it didn't feel like there was a missing piece there. I didn't feel like it was a problem I actually even ran into. So I'd be interested to see why Roman was particularly curious about this, if there is something specific that is happening to him in his app or his work where he's like, hey, this is actually a problem for me.
That's a good point. Roman, get on the Twitters. So the next question is from Marcus from Toronto. Material design looks/feels great, but there is a worry that overuse will result in apps that all look and feel the same, as happened with other popular UI libraries like jQuery UI and Bootstrap. What should devs/designers do to keep it feeling unique? And this kind of lends itself to, like, if you were going to deviate from the spec, when, how, and what sort of parameters should they stick to? Or is it kind of like deviate because you want to and you feel like it's right?
I think my opinion on that is, like, some of the best design comes from a really deep understanding of a grid and a structure, and then it breaks that. And that's when the best things happen, because there's an awareness of what exists, and breaking it can be really exciting.
Learn the rules like a pro so you can break them like an artist, right?
There you go, yeah.
Call him Pablo.
Bring out Picasso
Yeah,
again.
there you go.
Nailed it.
Yeah, I think we're all sort of true believers in that. And I mean, I think the floating action button thing that we have now is a good example of, like, where we're pushing people to do innovative things with it. And I think anyone on L will start to see, like, some of that stuff happening, and hopefully on the web as well. Yeah.
I do think that there is like I said before, I think there are some immutables. Like, there are good reasons why a lot of those things exist and the recommendations exist. And there is a time and place for branding. But I think if you break rules, a bit like with development, I think you break them for good reasons and noble intentions, and you have to, I think, be able to justify it. Wasn't just I did it for the laugh, I did it because I wanted to feel special. You do it because you believe that you're doing the right thing by your user by breaking that convention. Otherwise, I don't believe it's a convention you should break, because you've now forced the user to relearn how to use your app when they were happy using all the other apps that did the same thing in the same way.
Right. I mean, I don't want to discount, like, patterns, because patterns are good, and like, my mom can go from using her Android phone to her iPad and know where things are, because there's a consistent structure.
And there's a lot of flexibility in the spec, right? So the idea that you have to break out of the spec to make your app look different is not true, right? You can make your app look different and still completely follow the spec, right? There's a lot of room in there.
So I'm afraid we are out of time. I'm very, very sorry. But everyone give a big round of applause to the lovely panel.